Guys, this bike is absolutely mind-blowing and only costs $799. So Primos actually is a brand new company based out of Portland, Oregon. They reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to review the Dame, and that's exactly what this bike is. It's a steel, fully rigid bike that I classify as a true adventure gravel bike. And in fact, I took this bike out on a single track trail because I knew that it would be 100% capable. At $799, I expected this bike to weigh a ton, but this bike feels light and snappy when you're out on the trail with it. There are a couple of really cool, unique things on here where they could have really cheaped out and went the wrong way, but Primos decided not to do that. They went with an external sealed bearing bottom bracket instead of a square taper bottom bracket. Now, the crankset on here is a pretty generic crankset, but overall, I feel like it's gonna be really durable. Whenever I was out on the trail with it, I didn't notice any flexing and it was super smooth. The narrow wide chainring kept the chain on at all times. Now this is a 10-speed setup. That's gonna be a little bit more accessible whenever it comes to actually finding cassettes for it at a reasonable price. Now this is gonna have a Microshift setup on it. If you're not familiar with Microshift, I actually purchased a Marin Gestalt X10 and it came with a Microshift setup on it that had an Advent X rear derailleur. And there were a few things that I liked and some things that I didn't like about it. One thing specifically that I loved about it was the quick shifting and the responsiveness from the rear derailleur. That hasn't gone away at all. With the Sword setup, this bike shifts really, really well. And that's to be expected from a 10-speed setup because you have a little bit wider chain and it's a little bit easier to adjust overall compared to an 11-speed or a 12-speed. So the Sword setup shifts just as well as the old Advent X setup. Now, the one thing I didn't like about the Microshift setup on the drop bar was the braking. The braking wasn't all that good on my Marin Gestalt X10. However, they did move the pivot points on the actual braking mechanism up here on your hoods. That's supposed to give you a little bit better braking. However, I've gotten 100% spoiled with hydraulic brakes, and it's really hard to tell how much this actually improved over the last generation. I'm gonna say that it probably improved just a little bit because I didn't really experience any issues where I couldn't brake hard enough, but I did experience where I felt like the brakes could bite just a little bit sooner or a little bit more aggressively. They did equip this with Tektro calipers that are really nice Tektro calipers. They're not the highest end mechanical calipers, but they are very nice. But they did spec this with 160 mil rotors, so I think that if you upgraded to 180 mil rotors, this bike would stop much more aggressively than it currently does. But like I said, while I was out on my trail ride, I didn't experience any real issues. I just noticed that they don't quite bite as hard as hydraulics, and they don't have that modular feel that I'm used to with hydraulic brakes. So overall, I think the Sword setup from Microshift is improved over their last generation, but I'm gonna need to do some more riding to really determine if this brake setup has improved over their last generation. This bike felt very confidence inspiring out on the trail. I expected a $799 bike to have all kinds of weird quirks. This bike fit me absolutely perfectly. I am 5'11" and this is a size large. They accidentally labeled it a medium, but I confirmed with Primos that this is in fact a large frame. Now remember, this is a small company ran by 2 individuals. So not only are they getting these bikes set up and ready for you and shipped out to you, they're also applying their own stickers. I've got to give it to these guys for being a 2-person company. Their name is already out there. Whenever I was out on my ride, I actually had a local rider stop me and say, "Hey, is that a Primos bike?" I couldn't believe it because I had just recently heard of Primos just a few weeks ago. So obviously this is getting around that it's a $799 steel frame gravel rig that you can have massive tires on it. We're not even maxing out the frame and this has 50 mil tires on it. Massive, massive tires. And these tires, they're Continental tires. They didn't go with an off-brand tire, which was really impressive. These particular tires are called the Terra Hard Pack, and they worked really well on the trail that I rode. The trail that I rode was really all hard pack, but it was single track trail designed for a mountain bike. So I would like to get these out on some gravel rides and see how they perform. With the nicer side knobs and the tread in the middle, but not super aggressive tread, I think these tires will roll really well on gravel and also on pavement. Now, something that tells me that these guys at Primos are actually really cyclists is the fact that they spec'd it with a pretty decent seat. But this seat was actually surprisingly comfortable and felt really appropriate for a gravel bike. What's really cool is that they actually do all of their own artwork on here. So I really like that there's this kind of custom, whimsical, young company feel on this bike, but yet it also speaks what I picture Portland, Oregon to be like. It doesn't have a lot of flashy stuff on it, but it has really nice, super functional, super durable parts on it. Now the wheels on here are gonna be 650B. This is the first time I have ever ridden a 650B bike, and I've gotta say, I couldn't tell a difference between 700C and 650B. Maybe it's because these tires are so massive, it made them a little bit taller. As far as the cockpit on this bike, it's super simple and it feels just right for this bike. It's got a nice stem on it that's not too long and not too short, giving the bike a real natural feel. And also they put some really nice bar tape on here that gives it kind of a retro style with the little holes that are perforated all throughout it. Now, a couple of things that you may not notice right away, but are actually really crucial on this style of bike are the fact that this has multiple bottle bosses. You've got bottle boss mounts here for a traditional bottle, and then you also have bottle boss mounts up top. So if you have one of those bags that you want to secure to your top frame, you can do that right here. And you also have mounts on each side of the fork. This thing is really well equipped for bike racks, for accessories. They really thought about all of it and how people would want to take this bike on an adventure. One of the other things that's really nice that you probably would never actually notice unless it was pointed out to you is that they actually use Jaguar cable housing. So there you go, plain and simple, this bike is absolutely a steal. It's mind-blowing that these two guys out of this one company in Portland, Oregon can come up with a rocket ship of a bike right out of the gate for $799 with absolutely killer parts at this price point. So if you want to support a small company that is growing, you should jump over to Primos website. Like I said, I'll put some links down below. Now, the only stipulation that Primos had for me whenever they sent me this bike was to be 100% honest. And I've got to say, there's not really much on this bike that I would change. The fact that this is a steel frame, has name brand, super wide tires, the Sword setup on it, and pretty decent brakes, an overall vibe of just what I picture Portland, Oregon gravel scene to be like, I'm blown away. Absolutely blown away. And I think that if you want to pick one of these up, if you're wanting an extra bike or your first gravel bike, the guys at Primos absolutely knock this one out of the park. All right, guys, if you enjoyed this, leave it in the comments below. Let the team at Primos know that they did a really good job. They would love to see that. And also, if you want to pick one up, links down below. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. But as always, get out there and ride your bike. Maybe a Primos Dame.
Thought you was a threat. I do real life, do no tip and tat.